Good afternoon, everybody. John Kelly, profiler, and welcome. Welcome to today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about the torture and the sadism of Rex Heuermann. Remember, Rex Heuermann is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That's important we get that out there. But they found all this sadomasochistic stuff in his house. I don't know what this guy was really up to, but we're going to deep dive into it. We know it's about the torture, the pain, the agony, and all that. But what's the underlying root issues and cause of somebody like Rex Heuermann? Right? That's why I'm interested. Today, we're very lucky, very fortunate. We're joined by Dustin Ranck, private investigator, street smart guy, smart as can be, seen a lot, experienced a lot, and knows a lot. Also today, we're very lucky to have Pam Bogart, retired from probation in New Brunswick, New Jersey, where she was in crisis counseling. She's a psychotherapist, really, in crisis counselor. In a unit called Crisis. That was just the name of the unit, Crisis, over at the probation office. And also a really fantastic investigator. Pam is a fantastic investigator and researcher. We're so lucky to have her on today, along with Dustin. I couldn't ask for a better 1-2 punch going at this, because this is going to be a very, very interesting show. I think you'll find it very interesting. And I think for you true crime enthusiasts out there, you'll learn a lot today. You'll learn something different today. So stay tuned. You know, something I just want to throw out there too, I forgot to mention it in the beginning, to all you production companies that watch us, we want to let you know that we have about 3 projects. We're finishing up the third one with 3 projects. So if any of you are interested in a new project, please let us know. We've got 3 really, really good projects. We do not have the Long Island serial killer finished yet. That's going to take some time. He has to get his day in court. But we do have various projects through stock that are finished. And, you know, we're interested in talking to a production company who's interested in some really good true crime. At this time, I'd like to also thank everybody for purchasing my book, Discovering Lazarus, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of John Kelly, Profiler, how I kicked a horrible cocaine addiction, how I went on to become a counselor, a psychotherapist, and a criminal profiler. So again, it's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of John Kelly, Profiler. Also, what's very important to me is that we really understand how child abuse can affect so many people. And as you saw with the school shooting that just took place, neglect took place there as well. I believe neglect was at the root cause of the school shooting. And I really feel that it's very important for us to understand that reporting child abuse is not only our obligation, but our responsibility. Okay, with that being said, let's get to the show. And, you know, on the document that a to-do list that Rex Heuermann allegedly wrote up, and that the district attorney says he wrote up and has his evidence against him, what we're looking at is you know, some different remarks he made on there, and you know, some different points of interest he wrote down so he would not forget them. Number 1, smaller is better. Okay, now that's my number 1 coming off that list. And I want to talk about that for a second. Smaller is better. You see, if you ever guys ever notice, very rarely do you see a woman being grabbed off the street from 5'8" up. Usually not even 5'8". You don't see women 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", or bigger being abducted really off the street by a serial killer or whatever. They're always after the more petite woman, the smaller woman. The bottom line there is control. It is easier for the serial to overpower them and to control them. So that is why Mr. Human, allegedly Mr. Human, wrote smaller is better on his list, easier to control. And hang, think about it. If he's going to suspend somebody from a ceiling or through some kind of suspension apparatus, I mean, he's going to be focused on having somebody pretty petite, pretty light, a woman that's lighter. They're not that heavy. And, that way he can do his thing. And in the words of that document, have more playtime too. Okay. Because they're much easier to control than a bigger woman, and they are not as stronger as a bigger woman. Do you guys have anything to say on that?
Yeah, unless you want to go ahead and jump in, Pam.
No, you're good, Dustin. Go ahead.
So yeah, as this relates, you're talking about smaller, and as it relates to suspension. One of the things that when Pam sent that document over to me, the first thing that grabbed my attention as I'm kind of reading through his day planner there, I don't remember what page it's on, it's kind of earlier in the document. He's got a notation in there that says, like cut 6x6 post with some acquaintance of his. I'm not going to out him here, but that in my, knowing what we know about this guy currently, that it struck a chord with me, because within, when you get into, BDSM or bondage, or even in, allegedly Huraman's case, like getting into the torture angle, I had sent Pam a picture of this, but typically when you, and especially when you're utilizing the word play, the word play would be something that you'd find like within the kink community, the BDSM community. And it's important to understand that those communities are, those are consensual communities. There's a lot of rules, and there's a lot of guidelines that go into that sort of stuff. Now you get somebody on the outside of that doesn't know how to follow the rules, that doesn't have any self-control. That's going to be a problem if he's got contacts with those communities. So that post was like, man, it ran a red flag, because like media is like, well, what would he be doing with that? He'd be building a suspension device, or he'd be adding a beam to the basement, something sturdy that he could hang a victim. And now that could absolutely be for playtime, as you might categorize it. It could be for torture. It could also be for draining a body too. So, when you get into the other areas of that document where he's talking about drop cloths, he's not talking about painter's drop cloths, that weigh I don't know, hell, those things weigh 30 or 40 pounds and they're huge. He's talking about visqueen, or, plastic, like big rolls of heavy duty plastic. So all of that kind of made a lot of sense that a guy would be building something, and from what I remember, he had like a locked room in the basement of his house, or the lower level of his house, or whatever. And so that absolutely fits to me with what he's saying in this document. I mean, this guy is obviously, he's an architect. I mean, this guy, think about it. This entire document to me reads like an architectural schematic. Obviously the terminology is different and the subject matter is very different, but this guy he's building this plan in his mind of how he thinks he can, construct not only the fantasy that is his head, but he's constructing this fantasy physically too, so that he can get a hold of these women and get a internet and have his quote unquote playtime.
Well, that's excellent, Dustin. Great feedback on that. I mean, I really got a bit of understanding. on this guy. I mean, especially when you connect it to him being an architect, right? I mean,
Yeah, and I was talking with Pam about this too. It's these cases, these bodies go back quite a few years, and we know that Heuermann is not a young guy. I mean, he's around my age, just a little bit older, but it's probably unlikely. And John, you could speak to this a lot more than I could about when did this start? Okay, like in my mind, if this guy's got this kind of proclivity, I've read a little bit about his background and, his interactions with kids in school and stuff. I could see this guy absolutely trying to dip his toes initially in the waters of maybe the kink community or the BDSM community. But, there was something really telling about Nikki's testimony on the Nancy Grace's program, where she was interviewing her and she was talking. And John, we've talked about this too, as it revolves around gang members. She's sitting there having dinner with this guy and, they're getting ready to wrap things up and they're trying to figure out like where the logistics of this date are going to go. And they're not really going his way. And this young woman is describing how his physical appearance has changed, his verbiage is changing, like his whole attitude is changing. It was enough to alert her that like, whoa, I mean, there were other things that precluded that too, but I could see this guy trying to dip his toes into a society, a kink society or something, and being pushed out of that because it doesn't sound to me like he's got the type of self-control, because those communities, those are very intense interactions between individuals, or groups of people. And if you don't have self-control, things are going to get out of hand, which means you're going to get removed from that, environment pretty quickly because of the types of interactions that are taking place. And I could see him absolutely not fitting in with that if he is not able to control a conversation, to the extent that he's already like playing his cards with this potential date of his. He's already getting worked up. He's, things aren't, well, hey man, just, instead of, playing it cool, he doesn't have that social gift that some of these people have. And it was really telling to me listening to her explain how her spidey sense went off, and it was pretty creepy actually.
Do you
Dan, do
think,
you have anything on that?
no, I was just gonna say, do you think that he was part of that community maybe in the 90s, like when he first started to,
Yeah,
when the first bodies were discovered? Because he didn't he go to a club right in New York City, La Trapeze or something, which was right
something
around
like
his,
yep,
yeah,
yep,
yeah,
yeah,
Allegedly, he
absolutely.
did. He was there a number of times. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And you got to remember back in the 90s and even the early 2000s, those communities absolutely existed for sure. And the dark, the internet in its infant days was very much like what the dark web is now. You could find information, but it wasn't you didn't have the same type of access to information as you do now. So
right.
I could see this guy going out and trying to figure out what, the logistics of trying to figure out this lifestyle, like how do you feed that fantasy, and him not fully understanding like what that is all about and what the rules are. Like he's so like narcissistic, those he's not going to think those rules apply to him, you know. And that we see that we've got this document here is extremely revealing on a number of levels. But yeah, he did, as far as I remember, he had, or at least attempted to have some access to some of those clubs and communities.
With that being said, Pam, anything else?
Well, I was just gonna, bounce off of Dustin again. I was gonna say, so do you think maybe he dipped his toes into this community when he was, younger? And then it just sort of progressed when he bought the house into the basement of creating like so he could really let loose, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I could absolutely, because I have come, not serial killers, or at least to the level that Heuermann is allegedly, tied to, but having a lot of access to, the BDSM and the kink community through the tattoo world, which is a pretty natural nexus for those two things to exist. Yeah, I could absolutely see him trying to, that would be the natural thing. And especially in a place like the East Coast, where you've got New York City, you've got Philly, you've got Jersey, there's a lot of active communities there, and they're not exactly underground either. So it wouldn't be hard, especially if you got any kind of, you got a phone book, you got access to, I mean, you could go to a strip club or find out any number of ways. There's a lot of nightlife happening in that area. It'd be really easy to figure out where the clubs are, like who's the point of contact. But yeah, I can see him actually doing that, but just not, again, not understanding and not having the self-control to be able to manage that over any period of time, any any real cohesive group in those communities is gonna, that type of behavior becomes obvious really quickly. I mean, people are engaged in some pretty heavy stuff. So, and I'm not, comparing them to sex workers, but survival can be something you have to pay attention to, especially with somebody new to the group. You can't just let somebody in there that, there's one thing to be a sadist in the context of the kink community. It's another thing to be a sadist and not have the control to stop or to, follow the guidelines that exist within that community. So 100%.
Talking about Nikki Carbone, do I have her name right? Is it Nikki Carbone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talking about Nikki Carbone, now here is a street smart New York City kind of girl. Okay. She's been around. And she picked up on him big time. There's no question about it. So this guy sits down with her. He can't help himself. Like you said, he can't control himself. So through the course of a conversation over dinner, he starts talking about serial killers. Pretty appetizing, huh? He can't control himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And he's trying to have a
Right.
date with this girl. She don't know him. He wants her to come with him in his car. That's how the whole conversation started. He would meet her. She would, come with him and go to his house in his car. She said, no, let's meet in the restaurant and, we'll get to know each other there first, right? Smart girl, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very smart girl, street girl. So anyway, and thank God it saved her life. So anyway, now he's having a conversation with her over dinner, and he really becomes infatuated with serial killers and going over to serial killers. And you see, this again is what goes on all the time with these guys and their fantasy. They can't get away from it. Okay. Now he starts to get all excited or seems to be euphoric, or he's getting off. She feels he's getting off in some way on it. So after dinner, he's got to pick up the tab, right? I mean, a true gentleman would do that, especially somebody that interested in taking her home. And then he makes the proposition of, come on, you don't have to follow me. We'll go in my car. Okay. Because I don't want any other cars around the house. Okay. That was his excuse. I don't want anybody to see any cars. Probably like your telephone turned off at the very least. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is she turns around and declines. She says, I'm sorry. I have something else to do, or I'm going somewhere else. I'm not interested in going tonight. And I don't know what alibi or excuse she gave him or whatever. And I think she notified a friend that, she was not going on this date and she was leaving this guy or whatever. Then she talks about how dejected and rejected he became. And even though he tried to keep it together, she could feel the anger building up in him, right? Well, the one thing you really learn from talking to other serial killers on what pisses them off the most, what makes them very angry, is resistance. See, resistance really makes a serial killer angry because what do they want? They want power and control. Okay, that's what they're all about, right? So he's getting all upset, but he's keeping it in, but she's seeing it. She's feeling it from him that he's angry. He's very upset. Okay. And that's because he is in this fantasy and he has been fantasizing over dinner what he's going to do to this girl. No doubt in my mind. Okay. She just blew it up. She blew up his whole life for him. She destroyed his fantasy. She blew up his fantasy that he was projecting on her. All right. Way to go, Nikki. That's all I got to say. Then the other part of it is now he's not only been rejected, but now rejection is another form of abandonment, if you will. So now she's leaving, okay? And, you know, narcissists, really a narcissist of this caliber, really can't take rejection, okay? So as soon as that rejection takes place, look out. Remember I said resistance? Serial killers get extremely angry when there's resistance. Well, he's not going to act out in the restaurant. He's too smart for that. But resistance equals rejection. And rejection really is abandonment. See ya. I want to be with you. You know, so off he went with it, with the, you know, his fantasy all blown up. So,
You know,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, you know what I think she also did was she ruined his game because the friend actually met her at the restaurant.
Mhm.
So
That's right.
he was like, you know, she totally took away his power because even if she said no to him and she went to her car, he still could have done something. He could have overpowered her in some way. But no, she had texted the friend a picture of him and the friend
Hmm.
came to the restaurant. So she completely dismantled what was going to happen.
Yeah, plus somebody knows what he looks like too. So now there's two people that know what he looks like. Okay, very, very cool. Very, very interesting. You know, it's you know, this man is a man that is just really, really extremely, extremely sick. You know, I mean, going on to be bragging to her about how much he knows about serial killers over dinner, and then, hey, come on, come with me to my house and leave your car here, and I'll take you back. I mean, you know, for a guy that's supposedly a well-educated architect, you can see how the urge and the fantasy just overwhelmed him and turned him into an idiot. You know, there's no way he was going to make a move there. You know, the other thing too, getting to the writing and his list of what to do, what not to do when he has a victim. You know, these guys, as I mentioned in a video a couple of weeks ago, I mean, they are so compelled. They're in this fantasy all the time. You got to understand this. These are guys in prison now. They're in prison. They're looking to write, to draw, I mean, to express in some kind of sadistic sexual way what's going on inside them as they're entertaining the fantasy. I mean, this fantasy is like all the hours you're awake heroin addiction. I mean, they can't get away from it. They can't get away from it. It's always, always, always on their mind. And even when they're doing a to-do list, they're entertaining. I think you mentioned that earlier, Dustin. They're entertaining that fantasy. They might be talking about hanging somebody, but that's very sexually exciting to them. See, this whole fantasy
Absolutely.
is sexually exciting. And that's what they're looking for because most of these guys, when you talk to them, although this guy we got to learn more about him, he's a little different. He's a pretty smart dude too. You know, he read you know, the various books out there from the FBI on serial killers. You know, I mean, he knows his stuff. This guy, he knew how to change his MO, how to maneuver. Something else, you know, I think you mentioned, Dustin, how long has he been out there? Well, back then, the starting age was between 25 and 35. I like 25 for this guy. Now, am I correct? Is he 59 or 60 years old now?
60.
Yeah, right in there. 60, I think. Yeah.
So this guy has over a quarter of a century that he's been out there. This guy's got a lot of bodies. This
Oh,
guy's got
most
a lot of
certainly.
bodies.
Most certainly. Yeah. Most
And
certainly.
and they need to really look to see where this guy's been, because there's nobody going to tell me that he's only got 6 or 10
Yeah.
bodies over a quarter of a century. Not this kind of guy. Not with the appetite he has for sadism. I mean, this guy's got to continue to feed. He's got to have that narcissistic supply. He's got to have that power and control. And then and alongside of it, he's going to have an appetizer of torture. I mean, that's the cherry on the sundae for this guy. There's no question about it. He's bad. This guy's bad, dude. And he is smart. He is smart. He made some mistakes that got him caught. I mean, just think about how addicted he is. Before I get into that, you guys have anything to say on what I just talked about? Is there anything jumping out at you? Or do you want me to move on to how strung out he is on this?
No, I want to jump in, but I want to defer to Pam because we were talking the other day and she had a really, really interesting insight when it came to like the torture and the sadist aspect. Pam, when we were talking about the phone calls.
Yeah, the victims, the two, Melissa
Yeah.
Bartholomew and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Yeah, how he would taunt. Well, he taunted Maureen's friend, and he taunted Melissa's sister. And you wonder, like I said to Dustin, I wonder, were they being kept at his house during that time? And like, did these phone calls possibly occur? And then when he finally killed them, allegedly killed them, like, is that when, the last phone call came? Because I think even with I think Maureen's friend, I think John, you might have said something about this too, that didn't he, when he called her up, say something about, do you know where your friend's at? She's at a brothel in Queens or something.
Yeah, I mean,
Say that?
there was allegations of that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
she's in a
yeah.
brothel in Queens. I just saw her there or something.
You're always trying to, like, keep someone on a hook.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and taunting could be this guy's middle name because, again, when you realize the guy has a pretty decent brain, for what he's doing, he can't get away from the stimulation of the taunting. I mean, the body's up in the woods in Manorville and in the other woods up there, right? I mean, he could have just buried the body. He's got to take a body part down to Gilgal.
Mhm.
Ha ha, here's an arm, or here's a leg, or here's a head, or whatever. You'll never know who it is.
Mhm.
I mean, he was very, very much, you could see the antisocial personality popping out there. He is up against society. He doesn't like society. He doesn't like law enforcement, and he's taunting them. I know who belongs to that body part, but you don't.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
this is what this guy is. And when he had those girls on the phone, he was getting off, I'll guarantee you, on the grief, the sadness, the worry, the horror that those girls were feeling when he was talking to them on the phone. And then finally said, oh, she's dead, and then you didn't hear from him anymore. I mean, he had it down pat. He had it down pat. Again, now, he could have had the girls there, but don't forget, I think these phone calls were found to come from somewhere in New York City, like, very busy area, like it would be Times Square, around Port Authority right there. So what that tells me is this guy has nothing better to do. He's either done with work at lunch, or he just went for a walk, or he's in his office, or whatever the hell he's doing. He's got his burner phone, and he's entertaining the fantasy. Like I said, it goes on all day with these guys. Let me get off. Let me bring a nightmare into this poor girl's mind. Let me horrify her and scare her and have her feeling hopeless that she's ever going to see her sister again. Because he's going to tell her he killed her sister. I mean, this is one sick man, that really had it going. And I think we are just at the tip of the iceberg here. I really believe that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This guy, I mean, he's very interested in, just obsessing over this going on. And, it's like an urge. It's the urge he gets, and it's trying to control that urge. I mean, when we take a look at if we go back to how he pretty much got caught, or what set him up to get caught, to start the investigation on. What we have to look at is the girl that got grabbed, Amberlyn Costello. Now, if you remember what happened there, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I can be, he goes over to the house to have a date with her. He runs into her pimp. Her pimp happens to be there, or her boyfriend, or whoever, when he goes to the house. They get into some kind of argument. I think it almost turns physical, right? But it doesn't. So anyway, he turns around, he leaves. Now, they've seen him. They know exactly what he looks like. They talked about his car, all right? They talked about his SUV, or whatever you want to call that truck he's driving.
Yeah, the avalanche.
Avalanche.
Yep.
Yeah. So now he's focused on leaving. And the one guy, her pimp or boyfriend, whatever, says he looked like an ogre. So now they have a visual on him, and they're describing him as an ogre that drives an avalanche. Okay? Well, this guy's gone. It's over with. Amber Costello's out of the way. Okay? He is so obsessed with her. He is so compelled with something about her that the urge overcomes him. And he goes back to the house when, I guess, the boyfriend's not there, or the pimp isn't there, or whoever isn't there. And he grabs her. She went with him. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is he couldn't deal with the urge. He couldn't deal with the compulsion. It eventually got him. The addiction eventually got him, because only a fool would go back to where you've already been seen, where you try to have a date with two girls and you're an ogre driving an avalanche. I mean, that's the description of you. I mean, how many people do you see that do that, right? Or you see that look like that or on the road like that? So the bottom line is, this guy goes back. He can't control it at this point. He can't control the urge. All right? He is just so freaking addicted, to this sexual dominance and, this sadistic behavior, that he can't. And that was his undoing. That was his undoing. that's where they started to look for who owned the Avalanche, who owned Chevy Avalanche, right? And once they found out how many owners there were and started to check them out, which one looks like an ogre? Ha! So I mean, then they got onto them, and that led to burner phones, and but this is how compelled this guy was, that he had gotten to the point, and to that point, he had gotten away with it for, I believe, a number of years. But then he started to get sloppy, as they always do. And, he's innocent until proven guilty, but I think they've got him pretty good right now. I really do.
John, do you think, I was just going to say, do you think that he also went back there because they double crossed him?
I think that was part of it.
Yeah.
I think that was part of it. But, the other thing of it is these guys are so fixated on sex, on sexual excitement, and having that sexual dominance over these women, especially if they fit the fantasy, and she obviously fit his fantasy. It could have been, but I think they're just sexually dominance focused. I think it's that's how they fly. Their thoughts are sexual dominance. One guy I was talking to, he's away in prison doing 2 life sentences. He was given sex workers money to go buy the drugs and come back with the drugs. Then to get them, do the drugs with them, and some he killed. But I said to him, well, you must have got birds. You must have got, taken for a ride, right? Because you're giving the girl the money. She goes into the dealer, buys the drugs. She goes out the back door, and she has all the drugs for herself. He says, oh, yeah, I got burnt a number of times. But he said, you know what? He said, nobody saw me. The dealer didn't see me. He said it was the cost of doing business, So, I mean, it's very interesting. He didn't seem like he took offense. And you got to understand, a lot of these people don't have a whole lot of feelings at all. I mean, it's like talking to a wall. It's like talking to a sexually sadistic wall. I mean, they don't think, they don't feel like we do. They don't, they're not as much about carrying a grudge. Some are, but not as much as carrying a grudge as winning. And winning to them is being able to abduct a smaller woman in this case, and they're mostly all small and petite, and have sexual dominance over her. That's their main goal. That's the main goal they have.
Makes me wonder, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No.
It made me wonder as I was reading through, when we're reading through this document, right? Like, I know that there's some entries there from some other materials that this guy has read, but you got to believe that some of that in there is there for a reason. And one of the things that kind of popped out to me in that list was Stockholm syndrome. Now, I know what it is, and I think most people are familiar with crime and, hostage and stuff like that. But I would a guy in Heuermann's position, I'm not saying Heuermann, but a guy like that, would he, he obviously has like a disconnection from, like his fantasy life and his real life, like, the reality of just day to day. Would, because of, when a person or a victim, a person that's been in a hostage situation, they've been there for a number of days, maybe weeks or months or whatever, they start to develop this empathy. Patty Hearst is a great example of that type of situation. I can kind of see this guy trying to in his mind thinking, like if he can get these women into his control zone, like for any length of time, obviously nobody is going to respond to that, especially I don't, with the lack of control that he has for sure. And I don't think he really had the amount of time to develop that type of thing in one of his victims. Obviously, and he obviously killed them, but I could see him playing in his mind, like, because if he could get to that point, even in a short period of time, like to have somebody that is compliant and accepting, that wasn't rejecting him, he'd have a perfect sex slave.
But do you think he kept them? Like, how long do you think he kept them there?
Well, I
You
don't
know?
think he kept them long enough for that to develop, but I could see him notating that if he's reading material and they're talking about that, I could see him notating that
Mhm.
because it would resonate with him in his mind. Like, man, if I could keep, or if I could develop that, if I could develop that in a victim's mind, but, like, I don't think this guy, even though he's obviously not, he's not stupid, but he probably doesn't have like a broader understanding that actually takes some time to cultivate, over a period of, days, weeks, months. In Patty Hearst's case, it was, so I think it was a couple of years or something. It was a long, long time. So I don't think he's got that concept of time down, but I think the idea of it, of having some, a female that was compliant and doing whatever he wanted. I mean, part of that is going to be, again, kind of going back to the BDSM thing where you've got, dominants and submissives. He's obviously not a bottom. So he's going to be really drawn to that type of control, because when these captors, in those Stockholm syndrome environments, like, I mean, these guys got complete control, of whoever it is that, they've pulled it in or captured or taken hostage.
He also, Dustin, he also, and John, he also like had limited time because he had to plan to send his family away when he was going to do it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's even
Yeah,
in
yeah,
documents. Yeah,
yeah.
I'll pick you up at the airport.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
Get back.
one of the documents says, as I was telling Dustin, he even said, have dinner with wife the night before, and
yeah,
then he sent them off to the ski lodge for a week.
yeah, yeah,
And
Oh,
just,
yeah.
it's like he doesn't even say her name. Like that's
yeah.
how
The
much
wife, yeah,
everybody's objectified, right?
right,
Right. Objectify.
right,
That's the word. Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. Getting back to Stockholm syndrome, right? That is based on pretty much spending time with your captors, but also trying to having an idea of maybe how long you have to live, right?
Yeah,
I believe in his case, he saw it quicker than anybody else because it didn't take those girls very long to figure out that he was going to kill them and they were powerless. So, since they were powerless, they tried to play him by being real nice to him and, being extremely polite to him. I mean, I'm wrong in maybe a couple instances, but if you think somebody is going to kill you within a day or 2 days or within hours, you're going to try and use every self-defense mechanism you have in your cells not to be killed. I mean, the fear is just overwhelming. It's just overwhelming, you know. And I think that they would have really played up to him to the point, and they weren't BSing him in any way because he knew what was going on with them. They were just pleading for their lives. They were just trying to figure out
yeah,
how to plead for their lives. How to be nice to him to stay alive. and he probably relished that. He probably
Absolutely.
relished that made him feel, excuse the word, but monstrously powerful. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
he was a big, powerful monster. Okay, so I think that's where that got into his head when he saw that, because we all know he wasn't going to keep them for weeks or months or anything like
No.
that. So this is something he grabbed onto right away, like, and because they're nothing but objects to him, and the way these guys think, they do not feel the way we feel. I'm telling you, they're like aliens among us. Okay, I mean, he's probably thinking to himself, well, what, I'm going to kill you. I mean, what, what's this all about? You know what I mean? Like, and just unbelievable. And reading Douglas's book, really getting into John Douglas and really, researching that book. I mean, that took some brains, took some time, took some energy. And you could see, for us anyway, we were up in the air. Is there one serial killer, which we believe there is now? You'll go, but at that time, was there two? Because we see bodies being cut up, and we know cutters are different than the regular serials. What's going on here? Is this somebody getting their cookies off with dismantling bodies? Is this just witness disposal? Is this part of the ritual, the serial ritual of murder with these guys? Who is this guy? And very, very, very hard to figure out. And you could see kept changing the MO. Then, when you think about it, really, through the course of history, I don't know of any two serial killers that used the same dump site. I don't know of any. Okay. Well, yeah, when we go to Manorville or up in that neck of the woods, we get up into the woods up there. We've got a serial killer, John Bitroloff. And not too far from where John Bitroloff lived, we've got, a body from this guy. I mean, you talk about, him throwing some curves. I give so much credit to Long Island detectives on this and whoever else was involved in the case. And this is really, and it is not over yet. This is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I am even revisiting, and I don't believe it's him, but I have to at this point revisit Atlantic City. I have to.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really still, even though I've seen this, don't believe it's him. But based on this guy being so special at changing the MO and everything else, I have got to, we have got to, go back and take a fourth look at this situation.
Especially since he spent a lot of time there too, right, John?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
See, I know that, right? Right. And again, the older they get, the looser they get, the more daring they get, and that's how they usually get caught. If he stayed away from Nicky Carbone, right? If he stayed away from Amber Costello, right? Would we be on to this guy?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to back up for a quick second here, John. We, a couple shows or a show ago, we kind of got into some of the, I'm not going to get too in the weeds with this. I mean, Pam and I have been deep in the weeds with this, but, when we were looking at clues around peaches, right? Like we were batting back and forth, and there's been a lot of chatter about what that lettering within her tattoo meant. And we know that some of these body parts had, that the killer had tried to obliterate or disguise the tattoos because of identification. Well, even though we have some information around Peach's tattoo, what we do have now is we know what the lettering is. We know what it says. There's a little piece of script in there, and part of it And I had talked with Pam about this quite a bit, back and forth. Now, within that tattoo, there was like 3 initials that we could see when we were all trying to figure out what that meant. But kind of going back through that, because it didn't make sense, like as a tattoo artist, like why would a tattoo artist like wedge that in there, right? Like it's an odd place to, if you're going to put initials, and that tattoo's not very big, but still, even a bad tattoo artist, and I'm not saying that the tattoo artist that did it was bad. What I'm saying is even a bad one would have tried to at least center it up or made it a little more legible or what have you. But we did some treatments on that tattoo digitally, and it did reveal a word actually that's in that leaf, and that word is extra. Now that part there could be from a hard heal, what we call in the industry, it's got a little holiday in there. It could have healed bad and it scabbed over and flaked off, or for whatever reason, that word extra in there denotes something personal about Peaches. Now, typically in a sex worker tattoo, like we've talked about on the show, like, it means like extra sweet or extra juicy. Like, it's not rocket surgery. You just couldn't see it till you started to filter it down, and then it becomes pretty legible. But if it was obliterated, if it was damaged by the killer, it would have been for 2 reasons. One, it'd been more recognizable with some lettering in there, because it wasn't like a family member's name, or anything like that. But it could have had something to do with, a nickname on the street, anything that would have tied, because that kind of makes that tattoo a little bit unique. Now that word in there is not rare to find in a peach tattoo. It's not word to find, it's not rare to find that whole concept on a sex worker, or a dancer or something, somebody working the sex trade. But it made me kind of go back through my thought process and wonder if that was just a result of the tattoo not healing properly, or was a result of somebody trying to disguise that lettering for some reason.
Well, I think that's very interesting, and I think your summation on that is as good as any I've heard, much better, in fact. More to be revealed there, there's no question about it. The other thing that I'm looking at, and again, I want to go back to Pam when she was talking about his cruelty and, calling up the family members of his victims and torturing them over the phone, with the phone call, like, I'm going to kill your sister. I just saw her. She's alive in a bar over here in Brooklyn or something, Queens, whatever, right? Whatever he's saying to them. I mean, he's just trying to get high off the call. He's just trying to get high off the call. It's again that sexual excitement of pain, delivering pain to somebody emotionally, and that's what's going to lead us back. We're going to try to figure out that at one point in his life, did he feel powerless? That's what I want to find out. Did he feel he was out of control? I mean, was there some pain, emotionally or physically or both, inflicted on him when he was very young? Those are some of the answers we'd like to have, trying to research these guys. But I'll tell you, some of them too, and it was really hard for me to accept some of them. It's just like genetic, this objectifying, this need for this excitement over pain. They need to be excited over pain and sexual dominance. I mean, it's like part of their DNA or something. Pretty strange, But as of now, we don't know. But when you're talking about the cruelty, look at Baby Doe. I mean, I'll guarantee you, Peaches has the baby. He's in his house. Family's gone away somewhere. He sent them somewhere. Peaches is thinking to herself, wow, I want a better life for my child. Most mothers think that. How can I get a better life for my child? Right? Plus, this is, pretty nice, over here on Long Island. And she's probably thinking to herself, boy, this is going to be really comfortable for us. We could this guy really likes me and I can turn this into a regular relationship or something, caring relationship, you know. Little did she realize, and what was the horror that ran through her mind when she did realize that this guy was going to kill her and kill her baby. Excuse me, fighting a cold off here, as you can tell, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry for it, but we wanted to get this out to you. This is how sadistic this man is. Put nothing past him. Put nothing past him. How many serial killers that are interested in sexual dominance are focused on toddlers? Pretty bad dude here who's been running around for over a quarter of a century based on the percentages. Where's he been? Besides Gilgo. He's not averse to traveling. Sorry, Pam.
No, that's all right. I was just gonna say he's got properties all over the place.
Yes, he
Right?
does.
Nevada? Was it North Carolina or South Carolina? You know, I think he's got a piece of property in Massachusetts too.
And the way he set up that gun safe downstairs, we can call it a gun safe all you want, but I believe a lot of this work took place in there too, where nobody could hear anybody scream.
Absolutely.
And he would that definitely is one reason why he, you know, he bought that. It may be a safe place for his weapons, place to store his weapons, but also too, you know, nobody can hear you scream. And he didn't want anybody in that neighborhood. They're all together on top of each other hearing any screams.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it was interesting too, you know, where we're with Peaches and, you know, as it relates to Nicky Carbone, not that those two things are together, but, you know, we were talking about him like starting to lose control when she got hip to, you know, during dinner, obviously, and like things kind of progressed and she's obviously very streetwise. But, you know, it started making me wonder. I think that Pam and I talked about this too, that, you know, I was going through my mind around the logistics of that. And especially after I heard what Nicky had been saying, you know, it isn't a stretch to think that he probably ran into Peaches somewhere in Manhattan or somewhere in New York or whatever. But I started looking around like, well, how would a guy, you know, how's a guy getting what would be an easy way other than, you know, having a date with somebody, they get in the car, they take them home. But a really easy way to get a sex worker to your house is to pick them up from the train station. You flip them a plane ticket, and that train station is about a mile from that dude's house. You know, that runs right into Manhattan. There, it runs right into what is it, Penn Station, I believe, there in Manhattan. But I mean, it's heck, you know, have her swing over at night, hop the train. Maybe probably doesn't know she's got the kid with her. Picks her up at the train depot. Boom, he's got, you know, in, out, hello, goodbye. He's back home and he's got her like right in his control zone. Easy peasy.
Yeah, and he looks like an easy mark for a John. You know what I mean? Big, heavy duty, you know, kind of guy. And, you know, he looks like an ogre, you know, you know, so he, you know, I can make a good buck off this guy, you know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of women thought that. And unfortunately, you know, that kind of thinking led to their demise and a very, very, very painful demise. But as always, he set himself up. He made some mistakes, but we can't take it away from law enforcement.
Yeah,
DNA,
no, they
DNA on hairs. I mean, can't take it away from them. They got him. They got him. years later, but they got him. And it's going to be interesting now to see where he's been and to
Yeah,
see
that's that.
bodies, if there's any in those particular areas. We know one thing, he's a little lazy when it comes to burying. So we're
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
not looking for buried bodies. So he's probably thrown them out somewhere, somehow, whatever. Maybe cut them up for
Mhm.
disposal. We don't know. We don't know. But we haven't heard the last of this guy.
Yeah, there's an interesting notation, and it could go either way. That's in his planner there, where it's got his, dinner with wife and the others, the 6x6 post, but he's got at the very bottom, there's a little notation there that says concrete pour. Now, of course, he's an architect, I mean, it could mean a million things, but he's obviously not afraid to take notes. He's not afraid to like draw up his plan, but it certainly stuck out because we know these guys. He wouldn't be the first, and he's certainly not going to be the last to hide a body. They were not too far from where I lived in Oregon. They found two girls under a concrete slab. I mean, I'm talking 10, 15 miles from my house, out there near Malala. So,
Yeah, and him being involved with construction
yeah, it gives them access to an
gives
awful
him
lot of sites.
access to a lot of sites, and he knows where they're going to pour concrete or whatever.
Right.
Definitely, it's pretty easy. To be
Yeah.
put a body in there knowing that the concrete's going to be dropped the next day or something like that, poured the next day.
Hmm.
So many different things to look at. Because he is an architect, so there's so many
For
variables.
sure.
And you nailed it on the hanging and the torture and how we could do it and where we could do it. I mean, all excellent points. And that he knew. Yeah, he's got a good eye for how to position someone. With
Absolutely.
rope and
And
what kind
that,
of rope to use. He asked for the extra strong rope,
yeah, yeah.
especially for
Yeah,
strangling.
that was a bit of a chilling entry because it was clearly a result from experience. You know what I mean? It's like, wow.
And when you look at it all, the big B is there: bondage, 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 bondage.
Hmm.
No matter how he has them tied up, no matter how he has them hanging, no matter where he has them cornered, it's all about the bondage. And one sadist who's a serial killer told me, he said, I'm just addicted to bondage. Bondage is my fetish because I can do whatever I want to them, and there's nothing they can do about it. I can do whatever I want to them, and there's nothing they can do about it. So that, you know, creates that power and control, and sexual
Absolutely.
excitement that really pushes them forward and onward. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
complete power and control over another human being that they've objectified. More time for play.
Right.
So anyway, is there anything else we want to talk about or go over before we break?
Pam, do you want to dive in there?
I don't really have anything. I mean, like I'm just was looking at this document again, thinking of anything else I could, bring out. I mean, I just think it's amazing that he was so detailed that he even, you know, um, researched dump sites,
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
Right.
and told himself to pay cash for gas.
absolutely.
Right.
Anything not to get traced, have his car inspected ahead of time so he doesn't break down. Um, yeah. Um, and to get rid of all the stuff like he has on here things that, like things to get rid of, like the drop cloths and the
Yeah.
gloves and a hairnet. Was he wearing a hairnet when this, like, obviously it wasn't too foolproof because
Didn't work too well.
one of his
Yeah.
hairs was found on Jessica Taylor.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
his wife, he should have put one on his wife because they picked one of his wives up on one of the girls.
Yeah.
Well, you know, she's got very long hair, and that kind of hair, when you have long hair, you know, I mean, it just comes out, you know, it can go on anything. So,
Yeah, the ones that are really smarter have you know, higher level of intelligence. Like a Ted Bundy or something like they usually scope it out on the dump site because that's when they're most vulnerable. He
Mhm.
knows this. He is most vulnerable when he's in that car and he's got a dead body in that car.
right.
Right.
That's when he's the most vulnerable. And he knows it. That's why he's double checking and underlying and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And to be honest with you, I think he took a hell of a shot with that, a hell of a chance with that too, because man, most of these guys won't do that. They
I,
won't transport for long periods of time, like 40, 50 minutes or something like that. Or, you know, they're not going to do that because anything can happen. Car breaks down, flat tire, anything can happen, speeding, cops show up for whatever reason. I mean, you never know what can happen when you're on the road, you know. But he took that chance, and then for the taunting effect, he takes a piece of whatever body he has and brings it back to Gilgo because he wants to have it in his backyard, in his own garden, so he
Mhm.
could drive down the road and just relive the fantasy. That's what he's all about. I mean, I don't know how he ever got any work done.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, John. You talked about the you know, the vulnerability aspect, you know, when they've got a body in the car. I mean, yeah, I think it says right in that document. I don't think, at least I know that on the South Shore there, where Gilgo is, like none of those bodies. I mean, hell, there's not a lot of room down there, with the sort of exception of Shannon Gilbert, which we don't know that if she's tied to him yet or not. But I mean, but even still, like where they've got it mapped, none of those bodies are like, you know, he didn't like throw them over the shoulder and spend 20 minutes hiking them into the brush. I mean, there's not 20 minutes worth of brush to hike through right off Ocean Parkway. I mean, they're like, he pulled over, hoofed them over the side, and I mean, what they said, I think 50 feet or something. I mean, it's not far, but it's shrubby enough that it's certainly concealed. Absolutely. But I mean, it's literally right there. And like I said, you know, when I was there at Oak Beach, I mean, according to the map of where they found Shannon, I mean, hell, you can hear the cars, you can see the lights, you can, you know, the right time of day, see the bridge going over to Bayshore there that comes right over. So, I mean, he wasn't spending a whole lot of time digging holes, that's for sure.
You know,
Yeah, no,
you
he was lazy when it came to dig. He didn't dig ditches. I guess
Mm.
he felt it was pun intended beneath him, you know. But
Yeah.
but you know
I
the other part of it too is that area. I have friends that are familiar with that area. People would from the area that lived around there and everything knew enough to automatically stay out of going through there because a lot of deer go through there. That means deer
Yep.
ticks, which equals Lyme's disease.
Mhm.
So a
Yeah.
lot of them did not go through there, and he probably knew that too from living around there. There was a
Yeah.
lot of Lyme disease, you know, in that area. A lot of ticks that could give you Lyme.
Absolutely.
So, is there anything else before we break?
Yeah, I was gonna say one more thing, and it has,
Sure.
but Dustin brought up, you know, Shannon Gilbert, like, we don't know, you know, yet, you know, as of now, it's, you know, she's not a victim of his, but that Nikki, what was her, Carbona, her name?
Carbone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carbone. Yeah.
She, when I was watching her the other night, she spoke about when she had been to dinner with him and he was talking about Gilgo. That's when she really got, you know,
Mm-hmm.
spooked because he got very animated, you
Oh
know, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
but she talked about the fact that he brought up Shannon Gilbert. Like, what do you think of
Mm-hmm.
that? They say that it's not connected. I mean, this is how somebody would have had to get through the brush, you know. So I
Yeah.
wonder,
Yeah, yeah, I
Absolutely.
heard that too. It left me wondering.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
Mhm.
He probably loves the fact that it is connected to him in some way, that, oh, they don't think it's connected, but I got the secret. You know what I mean? Like it's another power play again.
Yeah.
absolutely taunting again.
Yep.
I mean, how many of these serial killers have we seen that have reported they have 50, 60, 70, 100? Henry Lee Lucas said he had 300 victims. They love to keep you guessing. They hate law enforcement and they love to keep law enforcement guessing,
Yep.
along with the public.
Mhm.
I mean, they just love to do that, to taunt law enforcement. You know, you really don't know how many I have, and you're really never going to know, because the bottom line is, I don't think there's any of them that give it all up. I don't think they give them all
Right.
up. I think they keep some that they don't give up, just to say, I've got something over on you, but you don't know it. You know?
Mhm.
Yep.
All right, so we finished.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, thanks for a great conversation.
Oh, thank you
This was
guys.
really
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank
You
you,
know, when Dustin will put up a link to your artwork. Pam, when you're finished with your book, we'll put your book up, a link to it. So anyway, to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us. We're a lot longer today, but very interesting conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you stuck with us. And until we meet again, God bless. Take care. It's a violent world out there, and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John and Pam.
Thank you. Thank you, Dustin, John.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Thanks, John.